Welcome to Female Voices, Life and Loss with your hosts, Teresa Reiniger and Wayna Berry.
Welcome back to Female Voices, Life and Loss. I'm Teresa.
And I'm Wayna.
Join us for each episode as we explore lived stories, offer gentle insight, and hold space for what it means to navigate life after loss. This is a space for women carrying grief, loss, and life transitions, especially the ones held quietly while still showing up for everyday life. This podcast offers language for what you are feeling and guidance for who you are becoming. And now your hosts, Teresa Reiniger and Wayna Berry.
Can I ask you something? Have you ever wondered, am I going crazy? Welcome back to Female Voices, Life and Loss, where we share lived stories, gentle insight, and hope for life after loss. I am your host, Teresa Reiniger. I'm a certified grief specialist, NLP master coach, life transition guide, and the founder of Living After Grief. Am I going crazy? Or is this grief? During this episode, I hope to help you answer that question by sharing the surprising ways grief affects our mind, our body, and our heart. Have you ever found yourself asking that question? Am I going crazy? I do hear this often, and we're going to talk more about that. Maybe it happened when you heard your loved one's voice, not loudly, not in a frightening way, just for a split second. You could have sworn they called your name. Or maybe you walked into the kitchen and you caught the unmistakable smell of your mom's perfume, your husband's aftershave, or their favorite meal. You smell that. Or a familiar scent that stopped you in your tracks. Maybe you were driving down the road and out of the corner of your eye, you thought you saw them walking down the street. You looked twice and your heart skipped a beat. And then you remembered, or maybe it wasn't any of those things. Maybe you've walked into a room and completely forgot why you were there. Maybe you've struggled to find words you've used your entire life. Maybe you've read the same paragraph 5 times and still couldn't tell someone what it said. Maybe one day you felt almost okay, and the next day you found yourself crying in the grocery store because you saw their favorite cereal. And somewhere along the way, a quiet question began whispering inside your mind. What is wrong with me? If that's where you are, I want you to know something before we go any farther. You are not alone. And in most cases, you're not going crazy. You are grieving. This is a place, really, again, where we have honest conversations. We're here to help you find that hope, find healing. So today, I'm going to talk about one of the most common and one of the least talked about parts of grief, because over the years, I've noticed something. I've sat with hundreds of women, different ages, different stories, different losses. Some lost spouses, some lost children, some parents, and some were grieving a relationship that never became what they hoped it would be. Different journeys, yet underneath almost every conversation, there's one question. It usually wasn't the first thing they said. In fact, it almost never was. Instead, they would lean in a little closer, lower their voice, look down at their hands, and then quietly ask, Teresa, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? I always smile and tell them, of course. Then they say things like, I still talk to him. I smelled her perfume last night. I thought I heard my mom laughing. I swear I felt him sitting beside me. Or I'm forgetting everything. I can't remember words anymore. I think something is wrong with me. And do you know what breaks my heart more than anything is hearing those things? It's not just that they're grieving, it's that they're grieving and carrying shame. They're waiting for me to tell them they're losing their mind. Instead, I get to tell them something completely different. I tell them, I think what you're experiencing is one of the most human responses to loving someone deeply. What if instead of asking, what's wrong with me, you begin asking, what has my heart been carrying? Just notice what comes up inside you when you hear that question. What has my heart been carrying? Because the question we ask ourselves often determines the way we experience our healing. So let's talk about what's really happening, not just emotionally, but inside your brain, your body, and your nervous system. Because understanding what's happening doesn't erase grief, but it often removes fear. And sometimes removing fear creates just enough space for hope. I remember one woman coming into our appointment on Zoom. She was nervous. You could tell she'd been debating whether or not to tell me something. Finally, she said, Teresa, I know this probably sounds crazy. And of course, I smiled. And I said, try me. She looked at me and she whispered, I smelled the cologne. She went on to tell me she had walked into her bedroom and suddenly caught the unmistakable scent of her husband's cologne. No one else was in the house. She searched everywhere. She thought, gosh, what's going on? There was nothing. But for just a moment, it felt as though he was there, she said. She looked at me, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to explain it away, waiting for me to tell her she's imagining it. Instead, I simply asked, what did that moment feel like for you? She paused, her eyes filled with tears. Then she smiled at me and she said, I felt comforted. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes we're so busy asking, did that really happen? That we never stop to ask, what did that moment give me? Whether you understand experiences like that spiritually, emotionally, or simply as part of the grieving brain, research does tell us they're actually much more common than most people realize. We just don't talk about them because we think people will think we're crazy. Many bereaved people report sensing the presence of their loved one. Some hear a familiar voice. Some have vivid dreams that feel incredibly real. Some catch that familiar scent. Some feel as though their loved one is sitting right beside them. They feel that touch on their skin. And some never experience any of those. There isn't a right way or a wrong way. There is simply your experience. And here's what I hope you'll remember. Your experience doesn't need someone else's permission to be meaningful. You see, our brains are remarkable. They're constantly making predictions. Every single day, your brain is quietly asking, what usually happens next? It's how you can drive home without thinking about every turn. It's how you automatically know where the coffee cups are in your kitchen. It's why you reach for the light switch without looking. Your brain loves patterns. It loves familiarity. And the people we love become some of the strongest patterns our brain has created. For years, maybe decades, your brain expected them to walk through the front door because they did, to answer the phone, to laugh at dinner, to sit in their favorite chair. to text you good morning. Those expectations become wired into your daily life. And then one day, everything changes. But your brain doesn't instantly change with it. It keeps looking, it keeps expecting, it keeps searching, not because you're in denial, not because you're broken, because love created pathways that don't disappear overnight. So think of it this way. Imagine spending 30 years driving the exact same route home. One day, the city closes that road. Would you actually turn onto it again? Probably, yeah. Not because you forgot, because repetition created familiarity. Love really does the same thing. The brain continues following those pathways that were built over years of connection. That's why you may still think, I should call mom, or I can't wait to tell him about this, only to remember you can't. That isn't failure. That's attachment. That's love. That's your brain slowly learning a new reality. And if you've ever automatically reached for your phone to text someone who's no longer here, because I have, please hear me. You're not going crazy. You're grieving. So one woman that I worked with told me she walked into the grocery store one afternoon, nothing unusual. She grabbed a cart, started shopping, moving through the aisles, almost on autopilot. Who's experienced that? Yeah. Then she reached the cereal aisle. She picked up the exact cereal her husband had eaten every morning for years. She put it in the cart. She continued shopping. And a few minutes later, she looks down into the cart and is completely froze. She didn't need that cereal anymore. She stood there in the middle of the grocery store, holding onto the cart, crying, not because the cereal, because for just one brief moment, her brain had done exactly what it had done thousands of times before. That pathway had been practiced for years. Love had made it automatic. You see, grief often hides inside the ordinary moments. It's rarely the big things we expect. Sometimes it's the cereal. Sometimes it's hearing their favorite song unexpectedly. Sometimes it's reaching across the bed, and sometimes seeing someone else wear the same shirt or having the same perfume. It's walking into a room and expecting to hear their voice. Those ordinary moments, extraordinary love. Because grief doesn't only affect what we remember. It changes how our brain functions, how our nervous system responds, and even how we experience ourselves. And understanding that may be one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. Just understanding how our brains think, process grief. Because when we understand what's happening, we stop making up stories about ourselves. Stories like, I'm falling apart. I'm losing my memory. I'll never be myself again. Or maybe you've been telling yourself one of those stories. If you have, I hope today's conversation begins to replace fear with compassion. Because grief doesn't just affect your emotion, it affects your thinking, your concentration, your energy, your ability to make decisions, even your ability to find simple words. I can't tell you how many women I have sat with and stop in the middle of a sentence, close their eyes, and said, I'm sorry, I can't think of the word. Then almost immediately they apologize. I never used to be like this. Sometimes they laugh nervously. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they whisper, do you think I'm getting dementia? My heart hurts every time I hear that, because what they're really asking is, will I ever feel like myself again? And the answer is almost always the same. I don't think your brain is failing you. I think your brain has been carrying something incredibly heavy. Think about your cell phone for a moment. Have you ever noticed that when you have dozens of apps running in the background, your battery drains faster, everything moves slower, and sometimes the phone even freezes? The phone isn't broken. It's simply trying to do too many things at once. Now think about everything your brain is carrying after a significant loss. It's processing heartbreak. It's processing memories. It's trying to make sense of a future you never wanted. It's adjusting to new routines. It's navigating interrupted sleep, heightened stress, constant emotional scanning, maybe legal paperwork, financial decisions, family dynamics, anniversaries, birthdays, medical appointments, and somehow you're expecting yourself to remember where you put your keys. Maybe your brain deserves a little more grace than you've been giving it. Here's something else I often tell the women I work with. Your brain has one primary job: to keep you alive, not to make you happy, not to help you be productive. Its first priority is survival. When something deeply painful happens, your nervous system responds exactly as it has designed to. It becomes more alert, more proactive, more watchful. It's constantly asking, am I safe? Could this happen again? What do I need to watch for? When so much of your energy is going towards survival, there simply isn't as much available for remembering appointments, for finding words, or focusing on a book. Again, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something significant happened to you. There's a difference. I remember another client sharing something that will stay with me forever. She had decided to do something kind, some self-care for herself. So she scheduled a pedicure. Nothing extraordinary, nothing extravagant, just one quiet hour. She settled into the chair, kind of closed her eyes to relax, and for the first time in weeks, began to relax. And then the technician smiled and casually asked, "How's your daughter?" Such a simple question. One that most people answer without even thinking. But for her, time stopped. Her daughter had died. She was still a mother. But how do you answer really that question? It truly caught her off guard. Does she explain what happened? Does she protect herself? Before she could even decide, her body decided for her. Her heart started racing. Her chest tightened. Her eyes filled with tears. She wasn't crying because of the question. She was crying because grief had found her in an ordinary moment. You see, her nervous system doesn't separate life into important moments and unimportant moments. It simply recognizes meaning. And for someone who has experienced profound loss, questions like, how's your daughter? Or even things like, do you have children? Are you married? How many grandchildren do you have? Can instantly awaken the ache that never completely leaves. That's why grief can feel so unpredictable. It's not unpredictable to your nervous system. It's responding to love. Maybe you've experienced something similar to this. Maybe someone asked you, how's your husband? Not knowing he had died. Maybe someone said, you need to move on, when all that you wanted was permission to say their name. Maybe a song came onto the radio, or you found an old voicemail, or you opened the kitchen drawer and saw the coffee mug they always used. Those moments can feel over, not because you're weak, because your heart remembers, your body remembers, your brain remembers, and healing doesn't require you to erase those memories. Healing is learning how to carry them different. Something else I want to normalize today is emotional inconsistency. Have you ever had a really good day and then wondering, if something was wrong because the next day felt impossibly hard. I hear this from my clients, and I always encourage them and say, you're not going backwards. So many people believe healing should look like climbing a staircase, one step, then another, always moving forward. But grief does not move like stairs. It moves like waves. Some waves barely touch your feet when you're standing on a seashore. Others knock you off balance. And here's the important part. A wave doesn't erase your progress. It simply reminds you how deeply you left. I often tell clients that I work with, don't judge your healing by today's emotions. Judge it by your willingness to keep moving and keep showing up. Some days showing up looks like going back to work. Some days showing up may just look like taking a shower. And some days showing up looks like simply getting out of bed. All of those count. Every single. Can I gently offer another perspective? What if your tears aren't evidence that you're failing, but evidence that your capacity to love was extraordinary? We live in a culture that often measures healing by how quickly someone stops crying. I don't. I measure healing by something very, very different. Can you tell the story now when you couldn't before? Could you speak their name? Can you receive support? Can you notice moments of beauty without feeling guilt? Can you breathe through the wave instead of believing it will drown you? That's healing. Not perfection, not the absence of tears, not the absence of compassion toward yourself, toward your heart, toward the journey you're walking. And that's exactly where I want us to go next in my conversation. Because one of the greatest myths about grief is that if you begin to smile again, you're leaving your loved one behind. Nothing can be further than the truth. Let's talk about that. One of the greatest fears I hear from grieving women isn't actually about grief. It's about healing. Because somewhere along the way, many of us begin believing something that simply isn't true. We began believing that if we laugh again, if we enjoy life again, if we smile, if we make new memories, somehow we're leaving the person we left behind. I understand that fear. I've heard so many times. In fact, I remember one woman sharing that I was working with, that she had finally agreed to go back to a trivia night with some friends. And she had done that previously with her spouse, and it had been a long time. And this was the first time she had went back after losing her husband. She almost didn't go. Part of her felt a little guilt before she even walked through the door, but she went, and something unexpected happened. She laughed, she answered questions, she smiled, and for a while she simply enjoyed being with people. But when she got home, the guilt kind of arrived. She wondered, how could I laugh when he's gone? Does this mean I've forgotten him? Am I moving on too quickly? Maybe you've asked yourself questions like that. Can I gently offer you another way of looking at that? Joy is not betrayal. Healing is not forgetting. Love does not disappear because laughter returns. In fact, I believe the deepest love is spacious enough to hold both grief and joy at the very, very same time. You don't have to choose. One of the biggest myths about grief is that healing means letting go. I don't believe that. I believe healing is learning a new way to stay connected. Sometimes it's telling stories, sometimes it's making their favorite recipe, or it even could be carrying forward the values they lived. And sometimes it's quietly talking to them when no one else is around. Love doesn't end. The relationship changes, but love has a remarkable way of continuing Something else I've noticed over the years is that grief doesn't always come from death. You've heard me say that many, many times. Sometimes it's years of surviving. I've coached women who come to appointments with me convinced they are failing. They can't concentrate. They feel exhausted all the time. They were constantly on edge. They wonder why they couldn't relax. As we gently explored her story together, began to realize something. Her nervous system had spent years trying to protect her from caregiving, from uncertainty, from trauma, from always being the strong one, from believing they had to hold everything together. One woman described it beautifully. She realized she had spent so many years living in survival that she no longer remembered what safety felt like. Maybe that's true for you too. Maybe grief didn't create all of your exhaustion. Maybe it simply revealed how long you've been carrying more than anyone should have to carry alone. Healing isn't asking your nervous system pretend nothing happened. Healing is gently teaching it. You don't have to stay on high alert forever. Not because the loss didn't matter, because you matter too. As I've reflected on all the women I've had the privilege to walk alongside, I realized something beautiful. No two grief journeys have ever looked exactly the same. Some cry every day. Some hardly cry at all. Some dream about the person they lost. Some never do. Some need to talk. Others need quiet. Some feel everything all at once. Others feel numb for months. And every one of them eventually wonders, am I grieving the right way? My answer is always the same. There isn't one right way to grieve. There's only your comparison has no place in healing. Your grief is unique as your love. So today, I'd like to leave you with a few gentle reminders. If you've heard your loved one's voice, you're not alone. If you've smelled their perfume, cologne, you're not alone. If you've forgotten appointments, lost your train of thought, or stood in the grocery store holding their favorite cereal, you're not alone. And if you've cried because someone asked a simple question, you're not alone. If you've laughed and then felt guilty, you're not alone. If you'd wondered whether you're going crazy, you are not alone. You are grieving. And grieving is one of the most human experiences we'll ever have. Earlier in this episode, I asked you a question. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? What if you begin asking, what has my heart been carrying? I'd like to ask you one more question before we close. What if nothing about your grief needs fixing today? What if what your heart needs most isn't more pressure or more judgment or another reminder that you should be further along? What if what your heart needs is kindness, your patience, your compassion? Because here's what I know after years of sitting with women in some of the hardest moments of their lives. Healing rarely begins when someone finally gets all the answers. Healing often begins the moment they stop fighting themselves, the moment they stop believing they're broken, the moment they realize my brain has been trying to protect me, my body has been carrying my story. My heart is learning to hold love and loss at the same time. That's when something begins to soften. That's when hope quietly returns. Not all at once, not with fireworks, but gently, one breath at a time. Friend, if no one has told you this lately, you're doing better than you think you are. Not because you haven't cried, not because you figured it all out, but because you're still here. You're still loving. You're still hoping. You're still taking one step after another, even when those steps feel incredibly small. And that matters. It matters more, If today's conversation encouraged you, I hope you'll share this episode with someone who may be quietly asking that very same question. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give another grieving heart is helping them realize they're not walking this road alone. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You're grieving. And thank you for spending this time with me today. I truly is an honor to walk alongside you. So until next time, remember this: healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens one breath, one choice, one day at a time. So wherever you are today, may you offer yourself the same compassion you would so freely give to someone you love. And as always, this is Teresa Reiniger, your host for Female Voices Life and Loss. Remember to take gentle care of yourself.
Thanks for listening to Female Voices Life and Loss. If this episode resonated with you, helped you feel seen, or gave language to something you've been carrying, we invite you to share it with someone who may need it. Be sure to follow the show so you don't miss future episodes and the powerful voices still to come.